Now let's have a look at the French papers. Alison Sargent is with us today. French papers, they're full, aren't they, of Harvey Weinstein, in fact?
They are. He used to be the Hollywood king, and now he's the Hollywood pervert. That's according to left-wing paper Libération on their front page today. New stories of women being sexually assaulted by Weinstein are coming out almost every day since the New York Times first broke that story. And Libération says the first reports actually broke a, quote, law of silence that had been reigning in Hollywood for the past 2 decades. Of course, the paper says in its and you can see there on the inside of the paper, actually, they say un masque tombe, a mask comes off in Hollywood. And in its editorial, the paper says that, you know, Weinstein didn't act alone. He did have this entire culture that was really backing him up. And Libé says we can no longer ignore that the reality of Hollywood is much more like Mulholland Drive, kind of a sinister film, than the beauteous La La Land that's more magical.
Nicely put. Well, France, of course, is a country with its own history of sex scandals. The media here is comparing Weinstein to a prominent French politician.
Right, Stuart, this is Dominique Strauss-Kahn, DSK, as he is known here in France. Very nearly maybe could have become France's president had it not been for a sex scandal where there were allegations he sexually assaulted a maid in a New York City hotel, you might remember. In its editorial, the paper Le Parisien is comparing the producer and the politician. You can see on their front page they talk about the sex scandal at the heart of cinema. And the paper says that, like with Strauss-Kahn, Weinstein had a reputation for harassment even though no one was saying anything. Festival goers actually in Cannes used to call him the pig of Cannes, according to the paper. And you can see the two men meeting in a drawing by Ranson from the Parisian today. DSK is asking Harvey Weinstein for his autograph, and you can see he's telling him, "You're my idol."
Another big story here in France. French court sentencing several young anti-fascist militants to prison. This was for burning a police car during protests in May 2016. Get some amazing, some quite scary pictures.
Yeah, I was going to say, you might remember those pictures. And we also saw them beating up the police officer who was inside of the car. This was during that season of mass protests against labor reform that we saw back in the spring of 2016. And as Le Figaro reports, they have been given quite heavy sentences between 1 and 7 years in prison for these young men. France's communist paper, though, Humanité, is very critical of the severity of those sentences. The paper says the verdict was mainly based on the controversial witness statement of one anonymous police officer. And the paper quotes supporters of the defendants who say that both the trial and its verdict were political.
Let's go to politics now here in France. Emmanuel Macron, he's going to meet with unions today, gearing up to make more reforms.
That's right. After passing the labor code reform, he's now gearing up for Act 2. The government says this next series of reforms is meant to protect workers. It's all led Catholic, they have to do with unemployment insurance and professional training, and it's all led the Catholic paper La Croix to ask just what kind of liberal is Emmanuel Macron. They give 2 conflicting opinions in the paper today, one from a historian, one from a philosopher. The historian is very much in favor of Macron's measures. He says it's all to level the playing field and make it so everyone's got a fair shot. Meanwhile, the philosopher says that that's a lie and that it supports arguments that all inequalities in society are justified because we all allegedly have this equal chance.
Much the same argument given by France's communist paper, in fact.
Right. Humanité, the communist paper, as you might expect, is very critical of Macron's reforms. The paper says, despite all of this bragging we hear from Macron that he's modernizing France, I quote, "The young Macron is using the old Reagan."
And another of Macron's reforms causing a particular stir. This is his plan to get rid of subsidised jobs.
Right, these are jobs for which the state pays part of the salary. We've already talked about them a little bit, how this could impact schools and cultural institutions like museums who rely a bit on these jobs. Today, France's sports paper, L'Équipe, though, is shining a light on the impact it could have on neighborhood sports clubs. You can see in that photo there a kayak club, and the leader of the club is one of the people that could be impacted by this reform. This is happening also just as Paris has been celebrating being named the host of the 2024 Olympics. Yeah. And so L'Équipe today is calling out the government's hypocrisy. They say that while they're promoting sports in front of the cameras, they're actually taking measures that could be very detrimental to sports at a local level.
Okay, those measures all being discussed today. We shall see what comes out of them. Thanks so much, Alison. Alison with the French papers on France 24. She'll have the international ones in a couple of hours.